Okay, so hi guys, those of you who are jumping on. I hope everyone can see me. I'm just working out the tech side of things here. So let me pull up my slides. Share. Okay, so so there is a chat box. Can people just, perhaps, or Q&A, can people just give me a thumbs up that they can see? Or Julia, I think if you're on this, can you just give me a thumbs up that you can see these slides? Great, thank you, perfect. Okay, so hi guys, and welcome to this afternoon's push webinar. So I'm Nicola Shubrook, I'm a nutritional therapist, and today we're going to be talking about nutrition savvy lockdown. Now there's quite a lot of content in here, which we're going to send all of these slides out to you later so that you've got everything that I'm going to be talking through. If you have got any questions, please do ask them in the Q&A box. What I'll do is at the end of the presentation, I'll make sure that I come back to that and go through your questions. And depending on how many of us are on the call, I may say to people, do you know what, you can unmute and maybe we can have a conversation. But for now, it's going to be me talking to you about kind of just how we can be a bit more nutrition savvy as this lockdown continues. So some of the things that I'm going to be talking about today are, here we go. So, okay, cool. So what we're going to be talking about is the gut, brain and immune axis. I'm going to be talking about some really important immune supporting nutrients and then what foods you can find them in. And then what I've done is I've kind of condensed that all into what I see as being the best kind of store-cupped ingredients that we can get at the moment. Fortunately, I think supermarkets are kind of back up to normal speed. There's not such a panic around food at the moment, but I've gone for some really basic, everyday kind of foods. And then I've got some recipe ideas in there for you, some inspiration. And then also at the end, I'm just going to touch on kind of how to keep on track in lockdown. What I want to be able to do is be able to kind of show you kind of things around, or some things that are coming through are things like alcohol. You know, if we find ourselves constantly kind of turning to the fridge a little bit, ways that we can kind of keep on track with our health, despite the fact that we're in lockdown. For those of you who may have some concerns in this area, will find actually, you know what, I'm nibbling on more sugar. I'm grabbing perhaps foods that aren't as good for me as I should be. Kind of some of the tips and tricks that I use and I use with my clients and things. So let's begin. So there's lots to get through in this session today, which is really cool. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the gut, brain and the immune axis. So the reason why I want you to understand the kind of the influence is because every single system in the body is connected. So often what can happen is we feel quite stressed in the current climate. Perhaps we might be feeling quite anxious either about work or family or our health, or the fact that we kind of, you know, are stuck in lockdown. And any thought that is kind of a stress-related thought, whether it's for a perceived threat or a real threat, what actually happens is the brain sends out a signal to the rest of the body to put us into this fight and flight mode. And part of that fight and flight mode is actually to move blood flow away from the digestive system. Because effectively what it's doing is it's saying, do you know what, I need the maximum amount of energy to either run away from that threat or to fight it. So what it's naturally doing is I think it's about 20% of our energy is actually is used by our digestive system. So the body naturally goes, do you know what, that's quite a lot of energy. So I'm going to move blood flow away from the gut. So every time we get stressed, every time we feel anxious, that automatically happens. It's not something we can necessarily influence other than kind of managing our stress levels. And so the brain automatically influences the gut. Blood flow moves away from the gut and then moves it into our muscles, into our heart, into our lungs. The downside of that is actually that, and I'm going to be talking about this quite a bit further on, is our digestive system houses 80% of our immune system. So if the function of the gut starts to decrease, then actually what we start to see is a decrease in the immune, or what we can start to see is a decrease in the immune system as well. So the other side of it is also that our digestive system makes most of our neurotransmitters, our brain chemicals. If blood flow is reduced down to the digestive system, we're not able to absorb all the nutrients from our food as effectively. Normally what happens as well is when we're a little bit stressed, we tend to grab more alcohol, more sugary foods, more junk foods, etc. So again, the nutrient value of that food as well also decreases. And then what the body effectively does is it breaks down that food in the best way that it can, and then uses those nutrients to take it back up to the brain in order to help us feel, you know, happier, healthier, etc. But if the digestive system is compromised, the immune system's gone down, and the body's ability to get the right nutrients that the brain needs to stay well goes down as well. So we get kind of stuck in this negative feedback system. So this is why nutrition plays such an important role in being able to support our digestive systems, our brain, and our immune system. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to break down sort of, these are the important immune supporting nutrients. So these are kind of my top 6. These are the top 6 we're going to go through. I'm going to talk you through why they're important, but also where you can get them from. Because it's all very well saying you need more vitamin D and more vitamin C, but I think it's really important to understand, you know what, these are everyday, these can be found in everyday foods. And there's lists of foods on these slides. As I said, we're going to hand these slides out to you later. The one thing I'm going to say at this moment is none of the information in here is specific to COVID-19, to the coronavirus. The reason for that being is there just isn't the research there yet. Obviously, this is still quite a new virus that we're all dealing with, and the nutrition research into some of these nutrients just isn't there. But the reason why I've chosen these nutrients is because there is research behind them in supporting the immune system in general and other respiratory disorders and conditions. So we know things like vitamin C and vitamin D, we're seeing that coming through quite a lot in the press. There's quite a lot of research going into it, but I'm not going to dive specifically into COVID-19. I'm not qualified to. There isn't the research there to discuss that, but generally these are kind of the robust ones that are just going to help you keep your immune system in good shape as we move forward through this lockdown period. Okay, so let's start with vitamin D. So vitamin D is also known as the sunshine vitamin. And the reason for this is because actually the D3 form, which you can see in the left-hand column, that's the most active form of vitamin D that we can get. And effectively what happens is when we go out into the sunshine, the sun hits the skin and then the skin converts it into vitamin D. The challenge being is we're just coming out of winter. Okay, we have been lucky. We've had some really nice sunny weather over the last few weeks, thank goodness. But if we're not going outside and getting that sunshine, and we need to be outside for about 15 to 20 minutes a day in order to get our sort of daily dose of vitamin D. It's only now in recent weeks that actually the sun is getting hot enough for us to get that vitamin D. In the winter, the sun isn't strong enough, even on a sunny day. The other challenge being is the darker your skin, the less able you are to make vitamin D as well. So if you have Asian or black skin, then your chances of being lower in vitamin D are quite high, because what happens is that vitamin D competes with melanin, which is what colours your skin. So hence the darker the skin, the more competition for vitamin D. The recommendation in the UK for a couple of years now has been that actually we should all be supplementing with vitamin D over the winter months. So that's from about October to March. Despite the nice weather at the moment, I'm still keeping my vitamin D supplementation going because of a certain virus that's lurking, and I want my immune system to be in tip-top condition. So supplements are a really easy way to get your vitamin D levels in. You can buy them in drops, you can buy them as tablets, you can buy them as a spray, really easy to get hold of. And it's one thing that I kind of say, do you know what, just top up your vitamin D, because on the right hand side of the screen you can see the vitamin D2 foods. So you can get vitamin D from some foods, but it's in a D2 form, which is less active, so it doesn't give us the same amount as it would if it was coming from the sun. Doesn't mean that we can't still get it from food as well. The challenge being is that actually most of the vitamin D2 comes from animal products. If you don't like oily fish, or if you are vegan, then again, your vitamin D levels are probably going to be a little bit lower, because vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin. So we're going to find it in the foods that have a higher fat content. So your oily fish like salmon, herring and sardines, you can get it in tinned tuna. Look for egg yolks that are pasture raised. So effectively the chickens have been outside in the sunshine. They have more vitamin D, and so therefore their eggs do. Mushrooms are actually a really easy way to get vitamin D2 into your diet. And actually, if you put mushrooms on the windowsill, they actually increase their vitamin D content. Little tip for you there. And then you've got fortified foods. So we're seeing a lot more milks and products, cereals and things being fortified with vitamin D. I think this is going to increase here in the UK because we just know that we need it, and it's so important for health because it helps regulate the immune system. It's really important for mental health as well. It's really important to help support mental cognition. Signs of vitamin D deficiency often include fatigue, sort of achy joints, or if you know that you are picking up coughs and colds quite easily, can be a sign of vitamin D. So it's a really important one to be making sure, and it's kind of my number one when we're talking about immune system. So next up, we have vitamin C. And again, with vitamin C, so this list of foods in front of you actually is not a complete list. Vitamin C comes in loads of fruit and vegetables. I've just put down the top ones to give you an idea of the ones that are highest in vitamin C. But vitamin C is an antioxidant. And there has been quite a lot of research that shows that if you get a cold, supplementing with vitamin C may well help reduce the symptoms and the severity of the cold. Certainly with the supplement companies that I work with, the minute kind of the virus hit, vitamin C kind of sold out everywhere because they are starting to look at the role that vitamin C plays in immunity, but also specifically in the role of coronavirus. They're looking at, and we're talking about high doses, so this is all medical stuff. So what we know that we can do is actually use vitamin C to help support our immune system, because one of the key things that it does is it mops up free radicals. So free radicals are caused by toxins, by things that we come into contact in the environment, by things that perhaps you know, if you're using a lot of products on your skin that perhaps aren't all natural. I was going to say pollution, but there isn't so much of that at the moment. But they're kind of things that the body just naturally absorbs. Either we breathe it in or it gets absorbed through the skin. And what happens is if free radicals are left to roam around the body, they can attach to our cells and then they can start to damage the very DNA of our cells. It's a process called oxidative stress. So what we want to do is make sure that vitamin C, which is an antioxidant, mops up that oxidative stress. So it stops the free radicals damaging our cells. So really important that we kind of get lots of vitamin C in the diet. And again, we can get it from loads of fruit and veggies, but these are kind of the top ones that are in there. A lot of the herbs that we use. So if you've got any herbs growing on your windowsill or in your garden, things like thyme. Thyme is really good. You don't need a lot of it. It's a little like power nutrient. So using thyme in your cooking is really easy. You can also use dried thyme as well. Slightly less vitamin C in dried products, but that's fine. And also, I don't mind if you use fresh or frozen products. So the great thing about frozen vegetables and fruits is they're normally frozen at source, so wherever they're picked, they're kind of frozen pretty much within about 2 hours, so it retains a lot of the vitamin C. So actually, it's a really good way to store stuff in the freezer and make sure that you've got a dose of vitamin C there for when you need it, making smoothies and things as and when. So vitamin C is a really, really easy one. It's water soluble, so therefore we need vitamin C in our diet every single day because the body doesn't retain it. So making sure you're getting it, where you can, at least your 5 a day into your diet would be a really, really good start. But hopefully these are kind of, most of them are everyday kind of foods that we can kind of start to get into our diets. Then we have up is vitamin A. So vitamin A is another fat-soluble vitamin. It's probably one we think less of when we talk about immune system, but one of the main reasons why vitamin A is important is, at the beginning I was talking about how 80% of our immune system is in our gut. And the digestive system has like a mucous membrane that lines the top and the bottom of the intestines. So if you think about like kind of your nasal passage or your mouth, it's always damp, isn't it? It's kind of like a lining, a damp lining to it. That runs all the way down the throat into the digestive system. And the mucous membrane that lines the gut is like a protective barrier between kind of the intestines and the bloodstream. And within that is something called secretory IgA, secretory immunoglobulin A. Just about to get these words out. And our gut bacteria, which I'm going to come on to, helps regulate that, but also we need vitamin A to help protect that mucous membrane, to help ensure that it's got really strong integrity. So the There's two forms of vitamin A. One is retinol, which is animal products, and then I'm going to come on to beta-carotene, which is your plant-based vitamin A. So these are kind of the everyday foods that you can easily get vitamin A from. Again, it's your oily fish because it's a fat-soluble vitamin. You can get it in dairy products and in eggs, so quite easy to get. Again, these are the top foods that kind of contain vitamin A. So you can get it in a lot of our animal products, but also you can get it as vitamin A in the form of beta-carotene. So that the animal products are in the form that the body needs and it just uses it straight away. When you eat plant-based vitamin A, the body has to convert it from beta-carotene into retinol or some other form of vitamin A that it uses. So don't worry too much about the tech. Just make sure that we eat lots of vitamin A rich fruit and vegetables. Two colours to think of when you think of vitamin A is green leafy vegetables and any fruit or veg that is yellow, orange or red in colour. That represents the vitamin A. So if you think about carrots, beta-carotene contains the components that carry the vitamin A. So sweet potatoes and squashes and carrots and red peppers and lettuce and melons and apples and all of those things, they're all going to have some vitamin A that are going to help support that mucous membrane and that secretory IgA that sits in the gut. So it's a really nice, easy one to get into the diet. Oh, don't know what that was. Okay, so next up is zinc. So zinc is a mineral that the body needs, again, every single day because it's what we call a cofactor. So zinc as a cofactor is involved in over 300 different processes in the body. The challenges with zinc is actually it gets used up by stress and alcohol quite easily. Also, if anybody's a smoker, smoking actually uses up zinc as well. So it's really important that we're getting enough zinc in the diet because, again, it helps support the integrity of the gut. So that mucous membrane I was talking about and the integrity of the gut structure, so protecting the immune system in the gut. But also it's really important when we're talking about mental health as well. It helps with cognition and memory. So we really want to be making sure we're getting lots of zinc. If you notice, for example, that perhaps if you cut yourself and your skin takes a while to heal, that can sometimes show a zinc deficiency because it's involved in that wound healing process as well. So zinc, again, comes in a lot of animal products, so meats and fish, but you can get loads of it from a lot of plant-based foods. So your chickpeas, your lentils, your beans, nuts and seeds, you can get it from dairy products and eggs. So it's quite abundant in our everyday foods, but the important thing is actually that we're making sure we're getting enough of it into the diet. So sometimes even though you think, oh, actually my diet's quite good, if your stress levels are quite high or your alcohol intake's gone up a little bit, you may find that you actually need more zinc in the diet as well. So one of the things I'm going to talk about later is the importance of protein. So, you know, grabbing some nuts or seeds every time you kind of have a snack or kind of, you know, in the morning, or if you're having porridge or cereal, throwing on a handful of seeds or something like that can be a really easy way to make sure we're just topping up the zinc levels in the diet. And next up we have selenium. So some of you may be less aware of selenium and its role in the diet or even kind of what it does, but effectively it's one of the body's really important antioxidants. So a bit like vitamin C, it's really important for supporting our thyroid. So our thyroid is a gland that controls metabolism, but it's also really important again as an antioxidant in the body. So helping mop up some of those free radicals that we need. So selenium again can be found in everyday foods. So Brazil nuts, chicken, eggs, just have eggs every day. That seems to be contain most of the nutrients that I'm talking about today. You've got your mushrooms in there, you've got oats, you've got your green leafy vegetables like spinach, you've got things like brown rice, baked beans. Again, everyday foods, but selenium again, we don't need lots of it, but it's important to make sure that we're kind of getting this important antioxidant into the diet every day where we can. So I hope everyone's all okay with everything I've gone through so far. I can see a couple of questions have come up, so I will come back to those. I promise. I can see that they've come up in the box, so I will come up to them. Then I'm going to spend a bit of time now talking about the gut microbiome. So as you know, I mentioned at the beginning that the microbiome is really important because or the gut is really important because it houses 80% of our immune system. It also makes a lot of our neurotransmitters. So it makes things like dopamine, which helps us feel calm. It also makes serotonin, which is our happy hormone. But one of the key functions of the gut, as well as breaking down your food and absorbing all the nutrients from your food, is the bacteria that lives in the gut. Sorry, that should say microbiome, M-E on the end, not N-E, apologies. So the microbiome is a collection of bacteria, fungi, yeasts, etc., that cohabit the gut and should be living in harmony with each other. The majority of it is found in the large intestines. You can get, the microbiome actually extends to our skin, to our mouth, to our nose. We're kind of finding it's on our lungs. There's actually a respiratory microbiome. So we're starting to find out there's a bladder microbiome. Kind of the body is we are large walking bits of bacteria. But the main reason why I'm talking about the gut is because A, is the one that we've got the most research on, but because it also helps defend that immune system as well. So I call the microbiome pets in the zoo. So imagine them as like your new Facebook friends, and they need looking after. They need feeding, and they need taking care of. So again, when we get stressed, when we eat more sugary and junk foods, when we consume more alcohol, all of those factors, or perhaps if we're popping Nurofen because we've got headaches every day, all of those factors kind of affect our gut's ability to keep that microbiome healthy, to keep bacteria levels at a good state. Every single one of us has an individual microbiome. It's basically like a fingerprint. And they've even found with identical twins that they have different microbiomes. And actually your microbiome, the influence of your microbiome starts from your birth. So effectively what happens is your mum, when you're in the womb with your mum's carrying you, your mum's microbiome influences yours, and then other factors that come in, things like breastfeeding, if you're born by cesarean, etc. And then as kids, our immune system has only started ramping up until we're about 2 years old. So again, we're kind of nurturing that microbiome from before we're even born, effectively. And then it gets influenced throughout our life through various factors. There are thousands of different strains. I don't think we've found them all yet. I think we're constantly finding different strains, working out the different roles. But again, the challenge with the gut is, like I was saying, because we've all got individual microbiomes, one bacteria that works brilliantly for me might not be so great for somebody else. And particularly in different countries, you can see a big diversity in microbiomes between kind of those of us who are born in the UK compared to somebody who perhaps lives in Ethiopia, or somebody who lives in Mexico. There's different bugs, there's different bacteria, that different foods that they're coming into contact with. One of the important reasons why the gut is so important is the bacteria in the gut work. They have metabolic activities, so effectively is working like another organ. We often hear the phrase that the gut is the second brain, and that is because there are so many nerves in the gut, but also because the neurotransmitters are made. But we're starting to find out that the bacteria have their own signaling as well. They're also really important for manufacturing some of our vitamins, including vitamin K, which we actually need for our blood, but also is involved in vitamin D. Our B vitamins, which again can support energy, but also our mental health. And what they do is they turn certain foods, which are fiber, into something called short chain fatty acids. So every time we eat, the food works its way down the throat, through the stomach, small intestine, into the large intestine, and the bacteria start to break this down into short chain fatty acids. And it's these fats that actually stimulate your immune system, and they help strengthen that gut wall that I was talking about before. So this is why the microbiome is so important when we're talking about immune health and also stress. So some of you may be aware of probiotics. You may have taken probiotics. You may have them in your food, which I'm going to come on to. But effectively, a probiotic is a capsule. I'm going to talk about capsules, or a powder or a liquid that contains the bacteria. So what you can do is you can take a tablet every day, or a powder, whatever it might be, to boost your good bacteria levels. Whenever you're buying any probiotics, you want to look for those that are double digit and in the billions. So you kind of pick up a box and look at the back of it and see how many billions of bacteria are in that. Some brands you'll see, oh, they've got like 5 million. You want ones that have like 5 billion or 10 billion in them or more. because we have trillions of these bacteria in our gut. So 5 million isn't going to have much of an impact compared to 10 billion. The other side of it is you actually want to look for formulas that are multi-strain. So don't just get one that says it contains Lactobacillus acidophilus, because again, the gut has lots of different strains in it. So you want to be supporting the diversity of that gut rather than just keep putting one strain in. You can also then get probiotic foods. I'm going to come on to that. And also prebiotic foods. Again, I'm going to discuss this, but prebiotics effectively are the food for the probiotics. So whenever you take a probiotic capsule or supplement, which is great after if you've had any antibiotics, if you've had a bout of tummy bug, or you've been traveling or anything like that, it can really help with things like IBS quite a lot as well. Whenever we take a probiotic supplement, you have to feed the bacteria once they're there. Do you remember I was saying earlier that they are pets in a zoo? Because the minute you stop, if you were taking a probiotic every day and you didn't put in enough prebiotics to feed them, the minute you stop the probiotic, those bacteria will die off within about a week to 2 weeks because they haven't been fed. They need that food to stay and survive and thrive in the digestive system. So we have to put the prebiotic foods in. This is also why I'm not a fan, when I was talking about the multi-strain formulas, I'm also not a massive fan personally of the yogurt drinks that you can buy in supermarkets that are advertised quite a lot. The reason why I don't like these is A, they have sugar in them. And actually some of the formulas out there, some of the little yogurt drinks you can get, particularly the low sugar ones, have replaced sugar with glucose syrup, which is just an absolute no-no for me, because sugar is inflammatory and sugar kills bacteria. Plus those drinks are only one strain of bacteria as well. So for me, the challenge is actually how much good are they actually doing? I'd much rather people went and bought a proper probiotic capsule or a liquid, or have a look at some of the more everyday kind of, I say everyday, not all of these are everyday for all of us, but some of the other foods that we can use. So, you know, buying a tub of natural live yogurt is a much better way of getting good bacteria in. So whenever you go into the supermarket, just go and look at the live yogurts. This also applies to not just dairy, but some of the unsweetened yogurts like Outpost Soya. They have bacteria in them. Most of them do, because it's part of the fermentation process that happens. It naturally creates bacteria in these products. The other thing you can do to boost it is, if you've got probiotic capsules, you can open the capsules and pour them into your yogurt and stir them in and eat it. You won't taste it, but that's another really good way, particularly if you've got kids or you want to smuggle probiotics into your other half's food so they don't know. You can open these capsules and pour them into the yogurt and then consume them, or into your smoothies, that kind of thing. The other probiotic foods that we can get are, again, they're not necessarily traditional to us here in the UK if you're born in the UK, but I know countries like the Eastern European or even in the Far East, things like kefir and sauerkraut. I mean, they're becoming more everyday foods here now, and you can buy them in the supermarkets again. These are naturally fermented foods, so they have these good bacteria levels. Tempeh, which is fermented soy. Kimchi, which is the one that comes from Japan, which is fermented vegetables. It's got a quite sweet, soury taste to it. And then kombucha is fermented tea. You can buy them as drinks. You can also make them at home if you're really brave. Sauerkraut's quite easy to make. They're a bit hit and miss because they've got that soury taste to them. So for example, sauerkraut might be something, if I've got a jar of it, or if I've made it, or I can buy it, if I'm having, I don't know, scrambled eggs on toast or something in the morning, I might put a dollop of sauerkraut along the side or add it to a salad. It's quite easy to add some of these foods in, and I would definitely encourage you to look at them and try them out. So kefir, you can get dairy products, so cow's milk, goat's milk. You can also get coconut kefir, and if you're really into it, you can make your own water kefir at home as well. There's lots of guides on YouTube and stuff for that. Again, sauerkraut is easy to make because it's literally vegetable with some salt and you just let it ferment. So it might be worth looking out for some of these foods and seeing if you're up for trying them. The other side of it is actually then to feed the bacteria. So you've already got bacteria in your gut. We want to make sure that they're thriving. These are the top foods that we call our prebiotic foods. So these are the foods that our gut particularly loves. Artichokes, leeks, onions, garlic, raspberries, beans. So whether that's tinned beans or fresh beans, doesn't matter. Bananas, the more unripe the bananas, the better. and that's to do with the resistant starch, which I'm going to come on to. Personally, I'm not a fan of green bananas, but you know, some people like them. Pears, watermelon, asparagus. I would also just actively encourage, whenever you're having fruit and vegetables, to have more of those with their skin on, because the skin on, you know, if you're doing a jacket potato, for example, the skin on a potato is where a lot of the fiber is, and that fiber is a good thing for the gut. It helps keep the gut moving, but it also is, the fiber is what the bacteria in our gut break down. That's their food. That's what they absolutely love, which is why making sure we're having prebiotics and high fiber diets is really, really important. I think the recommendation for fiber in the UK is 30 grams per adult per day, and the average is about 18 grams. If you're somebody who's also perhaps not consuming gluten because it doesn't agree with you, it's really important to make sure you're upping your fiber in other ways through things like brown rice, beans, lentils, your veggies, fruit and veggies, etc. as well. So important to get those in. And then there's something called resistant starch. I don't know if many of you have heard of this, but effectively our starchy carbohydrates, so potato, rice, pasta being the top three. We don't want to take these completely out of the diet because they are important. It's about quantity. So again, if you're, which I'm going to come on to, if you're worrying about weight at the moment, it's about making sure we're balancing our portions correctly and we're not just chomping down on lots of bowls of pasta. But there's a little trick. If you cook any of these three, let's go with rice. So if you cook rice and let it cool, what happens is that process of cooking and cooling the rice increases the resistant starch within that food. And actually, the resistant starch, again, is what our good bacteria love to eat. So the higher the resistant starch that we have in our food, the more our gut's going to love it, the more our microbiome is going to be happy, and we're going to be feeding it more. You can also cook the rice, cool it, and reheat it. That increases the resistant starch even more. So one of the easy ways to do this is, I'm a big fan of the pre-cooked pouches. So things like Tilda and Merchant Gourmet, a lot of the supermarkets do their own brands as well. I think Jamie Oliver's got a range out. They're kind of pre-cooked pouches of rice that have already been cooked and cooled, and then you can just reheat them as part of your meal, whether it's in a microwave or in a wok, whatever it might be. Really, really easy way to increase the resistant starch in your diet and therefore increase the food to your good bacteria and therefore protect your microbiome and your immune system. So I always try and look out for those. Or if I'm cooking rice on an evening for dinner, I'll cook enough for breakfast the next morning, and then I'll stir it through with some veggies and some egg or something like that, or for lunch, so that I'm getting that extra resistant starch into my diet. Okay. So these are my store cupboard ingredients. So these are the ones that you can buy and just keep in the cupboard, which will easily last for a week or two. And then what I've done is on here, so we're going to send these slides around, but you can see that I've labeled next to it the key immune supporting nutrients that I was talking about at the beginning. So for example, tinned beans. I mean, baked beans aren't all bad. I'm not dissing the baked bean. I don't mind it myself. The reason why I say not baked all the time is because they are higher in sugar and salt generally. So your other tinned beans are things like your black beans, your cannellini beans, butter beans, kidney beans, etc. Lentils and split peas, really easy, and they're cheaper if you buy them dried rather than tinned. The only thing with the dried ones is sometimes you have to soak them overnight, but it doesn't matter. Tomatoes, rice, nut seeds, your flours, your ground almonds, olive oil, butters, coconut oils, chickpeas, herbs and spices. Herbs and spices should be, every time you're cooking, whether it's breakfast, lunch or dinner, always going, what can I add? So for example, in the morning, breakfast, can you add some cinnamon or ground cardamom? For lunch, can you add some fresh thyme or dried thyme or turmeric or paprika? And again with dinner, they are little, your herbs and spices are like little powerhouses. They contain so many nutrients, particularly vitamins C and A, and actually some fiber. So just every time you cook, think, what could I add in as herbs and spices? You've got things like oats, coconut milk, tinned salmon. I go for the tinned fish because it's cheaper and easier to use. So your oily fish like salmon, sardines and tuna. You've got some tofu in there for anybody who's vegan. And I've got stock cubes and stock pots. They haven't got lots of nutritional value, but they've got lots of flavour in them. Excuse me, doing all the talking. So they're kind of the pre-prepared foods that obviously don't go off. And then I've got a list here of your stock up ingredients that are kind of your fruit and veggies, so stuff that you probably have to get every few days or once a week, whatever it might be. And again, with fruit and veg, I don't mind if it's frozen, doesn't have to be fresh. So I have always got frozen peas in my freezer, and kind of freak out if I haven't got any in there. Your potatoes, don't diss the poor potato, whether it's a white potato or your sweet potato. Green leafy vegetables, always making sure we've got some there. And if you go and buy a bag of fresh spinach and think, yeah, do you know what, I'm going to have some spinach tonight, but you've got it left over, just shove it in the freezer. Don't waste it. Shove it in the freezer because it works brilliantly to throw into omelettes or into a smoothie, something like that. You've got your milks, eggs, mushrooms, hummus. You can make your own if you want to. Personally, I just prefer to buy it myself. You've got your lemons and limes. With lemon and lime as well, the zest is a really important part of some of these nutrients. So you actually get more vitamin C and more of the antioxidants in lemon and limes in the zest rather than the juice. The juice is still good, but actually if you're making a smoothie, try cutting in a quarter of a lemon or lime and throw it in whole. Adds a real zing. Or if you've got a salad or something or some fish, just grate the lemon or lime zest over the top. Really, really easy way to like boost, like a little superfood boost. Bananas, things like butternut squash and sweet potato again, because you want your vitamin A in there. Berries, again, fresh or frozen. I normally buy frozen at this time of year because certainly a lot of the berries in the UK aren't in season yet. Your onions and garlics. Having in things like aged cheeses like Parmesan and feta, particularly things like Parmesan, they're lower in lactose, but also because they've been maturing, they tend to have a bit more of a probiotic action actually. That and the blue cheeses, again, they tend to contain some good bacteria levels, and then some form of yogurt or non-dairy yogurt. So what I have done, and again, don't worry about writing this down, I've kind of listed, using those ingredients, some easy breakfast, lunch and dinner ideas. I've also got a couple of recipe ideas in here as well that I've been using myself, particularly when lockdown first happened and kind of you can get an egg anywhere for a couple of weeks. These are kind of easy things that I hope will help you in terms of bringing together all the nutrients and the foods I've been talking about into easy everyday foods. So for breakfast, porridge, really simple. I would just sometimes, if you know that some people metabolize porridge quite quickly, they find that actually porridge makes them really hungry. So that's why I often make it with coconut milk. And that doesn't have to be a carton that you buy in the fridge section. It can be a tin of coconut milk. It's absolutely delicious, but you're adding lots of good fats into that porridge, which makes it denser and therefore it lasts a lot longer. So as in it will fill you up for longer, which again, which I'm going to come on to at the end. If you're worried about kind of snacking too much at the moment or weight, then you want to make sure you're having a really lovely dense breakfast, so you're not kind of then reaching for the cookie jar around about 11 o'clock. Any kind of omelette, eggs anyway, to be honest, any which way they come. You can saute some mushrooms with half a packet of pre-cooked rice, so those pre-cooked packets I was talking about, throw in a bit of frozen spinach and maybe some feta. Tin sardines on toast, don't diss it, you've tried it, it's amazing. And you could actually mash sardines into a bowl and throw in a dollop of Greek yogurt and make it more into like a pate for lunch. Absolutely delicious. Get your lots of nutrients in there. Making smoothies. Banana bread. Kind of everyone went through a craze of banana bread a few weeks ago because I think that we all had lots of it, but do you know what, there's some really good recipes, and in fact I think I've got the link in here. There's a really good banana bread recipe that I've been using for a couple of years that's quite high in protein, and it works brilliantly for breakfast with a dollop of yogurt. And then kale and quinoa breakfast muffins, which I've got the recipe for in here for you. Then for lunch, soup, any soup you want. I mean, literally the other day, I had some sweet potatoes left. I roasted them in the oven with some paprika and some olive oil, roasted them in the oven for 20 minutes, blended them with some stock and served it. I didn't worry about sauteing onions and all of that stuff. It literally was cook the veg, throw it in some stock, blend it, voila, you have a soup. A little trick is if you want to increase the density of it or make it quite creamy, you can actually throw in half a block of tofu and blend that. Doesn't give it any extra taste, but it really thickens the soup, which is lovely. Or you can throw in half a packet of beans or lentils or something just to add some density to your soup as well. Keep up the protein. I've talked about the tinned fish, roasted sweet jacket potato with hummus, some roast veggies. Again, I did this last night. I had loads of leftover veggies in the bottom of my fridge. I literally got them out, chopped them all out and shoved them in a casserole just to use them up. or you could just roast them on their own and have them in the salad. Again, any eggs anyway, or egg fried rice. I was talking about, if I've cooked rice the night before, I'll cook enough for lunch the next day. I'll then heat it through in a wok, throw in an egg, mix it through, maybe some frozen peas. I've made my own egg fried rice, high in protein, high in resistant starch, super easy, absolutely delicious. And then dinners, things like stir fries, lentil and kale salad, which I've got the recipe for. Making some cottage pies or chilies. Again, it can be vegan or meat versions because they also freeze really well. Any kind of curries, getting the spices in there. If you've got leftover potatoes, make some fish cakes. Literally cook the potatoes, open a tin of salmon, mix it all together with some peas, and then pat it down into a patty. You've made a fish cake. Jamie Oliver's got a really good recipe, which I think I've put the link on here for. Pasta, again, really easy because, again, you want your resistant starch in the pasta, so you could try cooking it and reheating it. I know that sounds weird. Just you cook it till it's al dente and then heat it through just gently. Or if you've made some and heat it in the microwave the next day, even better. Any kind of bean stew, any kind of risotto works really well for dinner. How are we doing for time? Okay, not so bad. So hopefully you're all still with me. Leftovers. I am a huge fan of leftovers, and I've got better at this since lockdown. Myself and my partner are now both kind of like, how do we use this up, and trying to get creative, becoming really aware of how resourceful we can be with our food. So like I've mentioned several times, you cook extra rice and use it the next day. You cook extra veg, use it next day. And also, you know, with breakfast, I think certainly here in the UK, or I was certainly brought up to think that breakfast was always sweet. It doesn't have to be sweet. It can actually be savoury. And personally, I quite prefer a savoury breakfast. So use your roast veggies with some eggs, like scrambled eggs or something the next day. Batch make soups because they last forever and you can freeze them as well. And if you've made chili for dinner, for example, save a little bit extra and use it on top of a jacket potato for lunch the next day. And if you've done a roast dinner on a Sunday, make some kind of hash the next day with spinach and egg for breakfast or lunch. So get creative with the leftovers. I think a lot of people, some of you may find you don't enjoy cooking, you find it quite stressful. You know, a lot of these it's a little bit trial and error in terms of adding flavorings and seasonings, but most of the time it's about just grabbing some ingredients and putting them together. And it's, you know, you don't have to be really good at cooking to make some of this stuff. And I would really encourage you to start, you know, soups are so simple to make. As long as you've got like a hand blender or something you can blend it in, just start trying to experiment with some of the stuff, because you may find there's some new dishes or combinations you haven't tried that you really might quite like by the time we come out of this. And I don't be afraid to try these things, basically. Don't be afraid to try and cook some of these new dishes, like egg fried rice, super easy. So these are some of the recipes that I sort of created early in lockdown. Again, so you're going to have these slides, so don't worry about writing these down. But effectively, kale and quinoa breakfast muffins. So I had a load of kale left in the freezer, and I chopped up some onion and garlic and kind of salted it all together, and then shoved it in a cake tin, muffin case tin, and cooked it in the oven. And they were absolutely delicious. These were so easy to make. They're high in protein. They're really dense. To have as breakfast, to have as a side, as lunch, or my other half was you just munching on them as a snack throughout the day. And again, you can change the combination of ingredients. I actually used, there was a Merchant Gourmet packet of grains that were Persian's grains. So they had all the flavorings and the seasonings in. So I was getting all of those extra benefits from the flavor of those grains, the herbs and spices. And they were, honestly, these were so easy to make. I would encourage you to try these. I also made oat and banana pancakes. I literally got 2 cups of oats and blended them in a NutriBullet to make it into a powder, and then made a batter from that and cooked them. I mashed through a banana, so if you've got leftover bananas, mash them into the batter and literally cooked them, and voila, I'd made these bananas. And these have gone down brilliantly with friends of mine who've got kids because they're quite sweet, and I used a bit of maple syrup in them. Absolutely yum. Goes really well with a dollop of yogurt on top as well. Here's a really simple recipe, literally butternut squash and coconut. Just boiling, roasting the butternut squash and then blending it. And I shoved in a block of coconut milk as well to give it some density, give it a bit of extra flavor. Use turmeric, you could use chili, you could use paprika. You could use garam masala, curry powder, whatever flavour you want. And again, it freezes brilliantly. And then my kale bean and feta salad. So again, this was using a packet. I used the pre-cooked pui lentils that you can get from Merchant Gourmet. Literally heat them through with some kale till it starts to wilt. Throw in some chili flakes, pour it into a bowl. I threw in some cannellini beans on this one, topped it with some crumbled feta and tomatoes. And we have this alongside meat on an evening sometimes, or if you could make a big enough portion if you're vegan or vegetarian and you want just like a big dense salad. Takes literally like 5 minutes to make. So easy. And you can play around with the combinations. So if you're looking for inspiration, these are my kind of go-to. These are my go-to when I'm looking for recipes. So BBC Good Food is fantastic. It's just got a huge database where you can literally just go in, type in what ingredient you've got. You can filter it down the side by time you've got, what meal you're trying to cook, whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, or a side. You can tick gluten-free or healthy. And these guys have been brilliant over lockdown. They have, because all their team are kind of working from home, they are doing quite a lot of Ask BBC Good Food. So if you've got an ingredient left over and you don't know what to do with it, you can go on there and ask them and say, hey, I've got tons of chickpeas, what could I do? I've got loads of eggs and yeast and things, but I don't have any flour, what could I do? And they're coming up with loads of combinations and ideas to help you. Pinterest, I think, is brilliant. Pinterest is a really good resource because it pulls in all the bloggers and their amazing recipes that they're creating. And I find that, again, I can just go on there and type in kale, lentil recipe ideas, and it will give me a whole host of stuff that I can look at. The Chalkboard magazine is really good. They have a lot of good healthy recipes, which I quite like. Jamie Oliver does some really good stuff, and I think he's been doing some really nice ideas around, again, store-cut ingredients. And then Olive magazine as well for inspiration around just ideas for food. So again, if like me, I think one of my challenges sometimes is, what am I going to cook tonight? Coming up with ideas. So they've always been my kind of go-to for ideas around recipes. And then this slide here has the links to a lot of those recipes I talked about. So the egg muffins, the banana bread's on there, Jamie Oliver's fish cakes, there's frittatas. I've also put in a veg and lentil cottage pie that is even for the meat eaters in my family. They absolutely love this. And this, if you fancy curry on a Friday night, this easy chicken tikka masala is amazing. Super easy to make. So they are my recipe links for you, which we'll make sure that you get. So lastly, if you're all still with me, I'm just going to talk about kind of keeping on track in lockdown, because I think it's the one thing that comes up a lot, and I'm hearing a lot, is both from my clients as well, is kind of people finding their alcohol intake's gone up, or they're finding themselves walking to their fridge quite a lot when they are hungry, not hungry, but that's the point. They're going to the fridge when they're not hungry, when they're feeling a bit bored, a bit restless, they're kind of snacking a bit more. So I wanted to run through some of the basic kind of steps you can put in place to kind of support this. I think one of the big things I would say though is, this situation is weird for all of us. And I found with my work, a lot of my clients have been triggered quite a lot with some of their health issues, both mentally and physically. So I think it's also just knowing, do you know what? It's okay that things aren't perfect at the moment. It's okay if you're finding you're not being as good with your diet or your exercise routine. I don't think lockdown should be about having to come out at the end of this with a six-pack or having achieved loads of different things, because sometimes it's about just getting through the day. So some of this is about, do you know what, just be kind to yourself in that moment. But there are things that will certainly help in that department. So one of them is staying hydrated. And I noticed a couple of weeks into kind of lockdown, I wasn't drinking as much water. Normally I'm out and about and I'm going into town to do presentations, so I'm driving to my clinic and I've got my Chili's water bottle with me, and I'm constantly drinking water. I found that sitting here at my desk suddenly was like, oh, I'm not quite drinking as much as I normally would. Or perhaps my alcohol or I know my caffeine intake certainly went up at the beginning. So staying hydrated is really important, because it helps flush through the system. So making sure that we're clearing out all those toxins that we're coming into contact with, that we're flushing through all of, our bowels will keep moving. We don't want to be kind of getting constipated around about now. But it's also really important for cognitive function and mental function as well. So we are more likely to be alert and feel better if we stay hydrated. So I always say if water is out of sight, it's out of mind. So I now keep a big old water glass on my desk and it's right next to my mouse so that it's there. Because if I don't see it, I forget about it. I include herbal teas in my water intake. I tend to aim for, a good idea is about 1.5 litres a day, roughly. So that includes herbal teas. I don't include tea or coffee where I'm putting milk or sugar or anything in there, because normal sort of breakfast tea and certainly coffee is higher in caffeine, which can be a bit more of a diuretic. It's not as bad for us, but I tend to kind of keep water in addition to any of those teas and coffees. I don't include fruit juices. I don't include fruit squashes. If you want, because of the sugar content, ideally what you need to do is, if you find water a bit boring, either squeeze in some fresh lemon, add some fresh lime, some fresh mint leaves, something like that to add some flavour. But try and keep the sugar levels down, because again, we want to protect that gut microbiome. But staying hydrated, the other reason why this is really important, particularly if you find yourself snacking quite a lot, is that the brain actually can't tell the difference between hunger and thirst. And so often when we find ourselves going to the fridge because we think, oh, I'm a bit hungry, it might actually be because you're dehydrated. So I would really encourage you, if you find yourself heading for the fridge, maybe head towards the kettle and make yourself a nice herbal tea, or grab a glass of water from the sink or filter jug, whatever you use, and then wait and see if it is actually hunger, because sometimes it can be dehydration. So staying hydrated would be up there as one of the things to help us kind of keep on track. The next thing would actually be protein. So protein being your new best friend alongside your gut microbiome friends. I really encourage you to stick to 3 meals a day and an afternoon snack, but every time you eat, make sure there's protein with it. So the reason for this is, whenever we eat food, the body effectively, through whatever process, will break it down into blood glucose, so blood sugar. Hence, carbohydrates get broken down really, really quickly generally into sugar because it's already a sugar. Complex carbs like oats take a bit longer and therefore a bit better for us than if we're eating a biscuit or a cake. So what we want to do with protein is, whenever we eat protein, and this probably applies for good fats as well, like avocados and olives and nuts and seeds as well. The protein, whenever we eat it, has to be broken down into blood glucose. So the process of breaking protein into sugar takes a lot longer. So the body has to work harder to burn or to convert that protein into blood glucose, and therefore the release of energy is a lot lower and slower, so it fills us up for longer. If it's filling us up for longer, it reduces sugar cravings. Whereas if you find you have, I don't know, a bowl of cornflakes for breakfast, at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, you're like, yeah, your body's broken down that sugar really, really quickly. You've got loads of energy. By 11, it's slumped. You're like, oh, I'm feeling a bit tired. I need something else to eat, because the body's just burnt through that carbohydrate and burnt it off. Whereas if you were to have porridge made with coconut milk, or I sometimes stir peanut butter through my porridge, or if I've had eggs, that protein within the fats within the coconut milk, the nut butter, the eggs, etc., gives me a much longer sustained release of energy. So we're at what, nearly 1 o'clock now. I had this morning just simply 2 boiled eggs with toast for breakfast this morning at about 9 o'clock, and I'm not even hungry yet. That is dense enough to get me through, and it means my snacking is a lot lower. And that's why I always say have an afternoon snack as well, particularly if you don't eat till maybe sort of 8 o'clock. If you have lunch at say 1, 2 o'clock and you have dinner at 8 o'clock, that's 6-7 hours of not eating. Your blood sugar levels, whatever you have for lunch, will have worn off by 3, 4 o'clock. That's when the snacking comes in. Absolutely fine to have a snack. Grab a piece of fruit with a handful of nuts, for example. Grab some natural yogurt, something that is dense enough to get you through till dinner. Otherwise, we just think, oh, I'll just have a few crisps, I'll just have a few biscuits. You're going to burn through that really, really quickly, and your snacking is going to go up. Now, obviously, the snacking side of things is going to come in when we're a bit bored, when we're feeling upset, when we're feeling frustrated, and that's okay. Do you know what? Sometimes it's just recognizing that we're feeling that at that moment, and don't worry about the need for an extra bit of leftover Easter egg or whatever it might be. But if you really focus on increasing your protein every time you eat, this will really help reduce those sugar cravings and help keep weight in check as well, because it means there will be less snacking. So like I was just saying, if you do notice that you're heading to the fridge more than normal, just actually pause and ask, am I hungry? just spend a moment. This is some of the training I do with some of my clients who struggle with disordered eating, is actually pausing and saying, do you know what, am I hungry? Or is it because I'm bored, I'm fed up, I'm frustrated, I'm upset, etc. Have a glass of water as well, make sure that you're not thirsty. And if you're not hungry, then I try and get clients to bring in more self-care at that point and think, do you know what would actually make me feel better in this moment? Because the challenge is sometimes when we think, oh, I want a piece of chocolate. And then you go and you notice actually that it's because you're feeling fed up or upset about something, you have the chocolate, and then you eat the chocolate, and then afterwards go, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, I wish I hadn't done that, and we start telling ourselves off because we had the chocolate in the first place. And we need to stop this negative self-talk, because we wouldn't talk to our best friends in that way, but we seem to think it's okay to tell ourselves off for doing stuff. And it's like, do you know what, maybe do something that makes you feel better. And whether that is, I don't know, read a book, do some yoga, go for a walk, have a bath, call a friend, whatever it might be, do something that actually makes you feel better in that moment. And as I say, just practice that acceptance and go, do you know what? Nobody's expecting anybody to come out this perfect. We've just got to get through this at the moment. So be kind to yourself in those moments as well. And if you do want the occasional biscuit or piece of cake, fill your boots and really enjoy it when you do. And I would just bring in, lastly, exercise and sleep. So we are still allowed out, which is good, but there's loads of stuff online that you can do. Push have been doing some brilliant stuff as well with their trainers, making sure you get your exercise in every day, because this really helps support endorphins. But obviously, if you are looking to kind of keep weight in check as well, it's really good for your metabolism. And sleep. Sleep is one of the big things that can really affect our immune system and how we feel the next day. Because if we have a bad night's sleep, we're likely to wake up and think, oh, we've had too much wine the night before, and we wake up feeling a bit fuzzy-headed. We're much more likely to grab the carbs and the caffeine. So really making sure that we're kind of sleeping as best as we can. I use a lot of sleep meditations on YouTube, people like Jason Stevenson, sleep stories on the Calm app, that kind of thing. And another little trick that I do every night before I go to bed is, as soon as I get into bed, I say to myself 3 things that I'm really grateful for that day. And they can be as small as my cat. I'm quite lucky that I've got a forest, Epping Forest on my doorstep. I go for a walk in my forest every single morning. It's part of my morning routine. Again, it's just being grateful for really small things that we can control at the moment, rather than letting the brain race into all the bits that we can't control. Okay, hopefully that's given you loads of information. I'm going to stop the share for a moment because I'm going to bring up all of the questions. I saw there was a couple of questions that had come up. So let me answer. I can see someone come up in chat as well. So if people do want to put questions in the chat or the Q&A, please do. And I'm going to go through these now. So let me have a look at the questions. For vitamin D supplements, what's the recommended daily IU? So the recommended daily IU is 400 IU. That's the kind of standard for all adults. For kids under the age of 12, it's a little less. I think it's about 200 or 250. Vitamin D is one of those things that actually can be quite safely taken up to 1000 IU. And again, if you have darker skin, I would probably recommend taking a slightly higher dose, or making sure that you're kind of taking your 400 IU and then maybe topping up with some of the vitamin D foods like the oily fish, etc. You can some of the really easy vitamin D that I use, there is a brand called beta-U. So I can see someone asking what's IU. So most IU is the measurement of the amount of vitamin D you need. So most vitamins you get will be in milligrams. So you'll see like a recommended daily allowance of vitamin B12 might be, I don't know, 200 milligrams. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. So vitamin D is basically, it's a microgram rather than a milligram. So it's 400 IU or I think that equates to 25 micrograms. It's just the unit of weight of that nutrient. So yeah, vitamin D, beta-U do some brilliant sprays. I use NutriAdvance, they do drops. BioCare, they're also really good brands. They're quite easy to get, these vitamin D supplements. What else is there? Do I recommend any specific probiotic supplement brands? Yes. So the ones that kind of, obviously, again, it depends on the individual and what we're looking after. If you want just a good all-round health one, BioCult is really good. I'm going to spell, do you know what? I'm going to write that in the chat so people can see the name. So BioCult. is a really, really good all-rounder, and one that I find is very effective for everybody, really safe to use. They also do a really good one for people who have migraines as well, called Biocult. There's lots of research into this. Biocult Migrea it's called. There's lots of research on that. Another really good brand that I've used for years is called OptiBac. Can't spell. OptiBac Probiotics. And they do every day. I tend to get the max strength. So you remember I was talking about in billions. They do an everyday max strength, which is really good. And if anybody wants one for kids, I always get proven probiotics for kids because they come in powder form, and they do really good formulas for back to school, but also include things like vitamin D and nutrients in there as well. So they're really, really good brands. Views on coconut sugar. Is it a good alternative to regular sugar? Generally, sugar is sugar, in all honesty. Yeah, sugar is sugar. Then there probably is a little bit more micronutrients, so trace minerals in coconut sugar. Same with like salt, like pink Himalayan salt is slightly better for you than the normal salt because it's got slightly more minerals in it. For me, sugar is sugar. I tend to stick to honey maple syrup if I'm using sugar. It's you know, I guess it's how much you're using as well. But it's not bad. It's not bad. I'm not a big fan of things like agar syrup, date nectars, golden syrup. Absolutely no way. So as long as it's kind of been hasn't been refined too much, coconut sugars, yeah, it's okay. Or brown sugar. I use brown sugar sometimes in my cooking instead of a normal white sugar because, again, it's got slightly higher mineral content in it. So that can be quite good. Okay, there's a few things coming up on chat. As we're limited on time outside, should we be avoiding eating after a specific time? Do you know what the research is? It doesn't actually make a difference if you eat later in terms of weight. The things to bear in mind is what you're eating. And also, personally, I always say try and eat 2 hours before you go to bed. Just give your body time to be digesting that food because it might affect sleep. The reason being is the body's always going to be moving energy to the parts of the body that it needs the most. So you're trying to go to sleep, yet you've just eaten dinner maybe half an hour ago, and the body's still breaking down the food. It might be using the energy to break down food rather than the energy to sleep. So that's probably more what I would be looking at. But in terms of weight, at the moment, there isn't any research that kind of endorses, oh, if I eat really late, I'm going to put weight on. I would also just make sure you're getting your evening meal, or if you eat early, like 6 o'clock or something, that sometimes I encourage people to have just a small protein-based something like warm milk or a little bit of yogurt or something before you go to bed about 9, 10 o'clock. Because again, if you have too many carbohydrates at dinner, your body's breaking it down, you go to sleep, and then your blood sugar levels drop while you're asleep. And sometimes we get woken up in the night because our blood sugar levels have dropped. That can often be the case if you've had too many wines or beers on an evening as well. The body breaks down the carbohydrates and the sugars from the alcohol, and our blood sugars drop around normally about 3 a.m. And then we get woken up with a bit of an adrenaline shot. Say, hey, my blood sugars have dropped. I need something. So hopefully that asks the question. Any others? Okay. Any other questions before we finish? No? Okay. I'll put here, if anybody's got any questions, I'll give you my email address. It's nicola@pushmindandbody.com. If anybody's got any questions, if there's something you want to ask me, if you want some help with, please just drop me an email. Let me know and I'll do my best to answer that question for you. We're going to make sure you guys have the slides. There was another question that's come up in the Q&A. Are super green powders effective? Do you know what? I love super green powders. I just find them, they just give me a real boost. So yes, depending on the brands that you buy. I use one, I'll put it in the chat, and I've been using it for years. I affectionately call it Green Gunge. So I use, there's a brand called Kiki Health, and they do one called Nature's Live. Don't all go and buy it because I want to make sure I can still get it in lockdown. They do one called Nature's Living Superfood. So green powders are effectively freeze-dried greens. The Nature's Living Superfood is a combination of sea greens, sea algae, and land vegetables. So it's things like chlorella, spirulina, broccoli, wheatgrass, barley grass, There's all sorts of them that's got probiotic action in there as well. I find them really good for, they're very anti-inflammatory. I think they help support phase 1 and phase 2 of our liver detoxification. So again, if your alcohol's gone up a little bit, I find they can really help support hormones and detoxification from the liver. And they've got a bit of probiotic action in there as well. So they help support digestive system. So yeah, I'm a big fan. It's about finding the right ones. They all have slightly different tastes. And also just make sure that you haven't got one that's got added sugar or stevia. So a lot of the brands we're seeing at the moment often say, oh, no added sugar. Check the labels. They are more likely to have added artificial sweeteners or stevias in them. And to me, they're still not very good for our digestive or immune health. So try and find brands that don't have any of those kind of added extras. They do, super greens do have that kind of grassy taste, so they're not up for everyone. You can get some which have got powdered berries in them as well. There's some quite good brands out there. But again, just double check the labels that there's no sort of hidden nasties in there. Hopefully that answered that question. Okay, so we're going to make sure that you guys get the slides. As I said, please email me if you've got any questions at all, nicola@pushmindandbody.com. And I would just like to say thank you so much for joining me in this. I've gone over, as always. I did say to Julia that I probably would. Hopefully I've given you lots of information on really easy everyday foods that you can just add to your diet to support your immune system. They're going to support your gut, they'll support your mental health, and help get you through this lockdown period. So thank you for joining me, guys. All stay well, and hopefully we'll be back another time. Thank you.